AI, artificial intelligence, the bad guys from the Matrix. What used to be the future is kind of happening right now. And as seasoned cybersecurity professionals, we certainly want to know how it's being used in our environments, right? Find out how on today's Tanium Tech Talks. Welcome back to Tanium Tech Talks. Today we're talking about artificial intelligence and our new Guardian AI dashboard. With me today, as always, is my wonderful co-host, Jesh Sachs.
AI is absolutely everywhere we look nowadays. From coding to education, content creation, even Super Bowl ads, we cannot seem to get away from it. So, where is AI in your environment and why should you care about that? From MCP servers to local model files in OpenClaw, we are talking to the experts about a brand new Tanium dashboard that gives you visibility into what's happening with AI in your IT estate. Join us today for this topic with Melissa Bishoping and Tyler Schultz. Please go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Thank you, Jesh and Alex. My name is Melissa Bishoping, Senior Director of Security and Product Design Research here at Tanium. It's been a little while since I've done a tech talk, so I am really excited to be back and even more excited that we're here to bring you brand new visibility from within the Tanium platform using this Tanium Guardian content. On the security and product design research team, we build all of the Guardian content that you see in console, and we do that coming from a place of, solving the problems that we want to solve as security experts, as security researchers, the stuff that we know is a real pain point. So I've brought with me today one of the guys from the team. This is Tyler Schultz, who is kind of the brains behind starting this AI dashboard.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tyler Schultz. I'm glad to be back. And I have a background in cybersecurity. I started out doing hunting and incident response in the United States Air Force, then moved over to Tanium, was a technical account manager for a little bit, threat response me, and moved over to our endpoint security team, and then landed on our security research team. And I'm happy to present the AI dashboard to you today.
Melissa and Tyler, every time I hear you guys' credentials, I'm just blown away that number one, I get to work with you, but number two, our customers get to leverage that immense just brain trust that y'all have and get content like this dashboard that we are going to dive in. So tell me, why is this AI visibility dashboard even important? What's it going to do for us?
This is obviously the topic of the last couple of years. When ChatGPT started getting big, what was that, 2022, kind of 2023 timeframe, we all knew it was going to be a transformational technology, but I don't think any of us predicted the speed at which it was going to just permeate every part of our lives, both personally and professionally. You kind of mentioned, Jesh, like even the Super Bowl commercials, right? It is everywhere. And it's not only everywhere on your phone or on the TV, it is everywhere in your environment. If you are a technical leader, if you're a CISO, if you're a CIO, you need to be thinking about these challenges because while it is a great power multiplier, like I talk about it as a force multiplier for your teams and what they can do, it can also rapidly increase your attack surface. And I think a lot of people are struggling to understand which parts of the AI landscape scare them and which ones they actually need to be really focusing on.
That's really exciting, Melissa. And it's funny. I know we're going to talk about a lot of things, but AI in the news recently, I get a lot of nerd news. I'm clearly one of the biggest nerds at Tanium. And like recently I heard about an AI video game that was created that only AI agents are supposed to be allowed to play. And that's just wild to me, right? And so I know it's a little off topic, but it is kind of interesting. So I'm really excited to see what you have to show for us today.
Awesome. I would love to start diving into this. If you don't mind, Tyler, can we go ahead and pivot? I'd love to get started framing this up about kind of what you can expect with the content. So you'll get an alert in your console for this content when it arrives, letting you know that you've got some AI tooling, and that when you click on that, it's going to bring you into the dashboard itself. The reason I kind of wanted to start here is to really frame up this. This is a complex ecosystem, and we've got a whole bunch of different categories of problems. Like, are you familiar with, I guess, Jesh or Alex? What when you think of AI risk, what are you thinking of? What comes to mind immediately?
Oh goodness. For me, it's more so just where is AI getting all the data from? How are we training it? Can it get access to my stuff that I don't want it to see? And is that now going in and can someone else get it? Like, do I have something here that's going to be spread way more than I intended by feeding it into AI? That's my initial thought.
And my initial thought is, we keep seeing a lot of these articles about CEOs saying, oh, 60% of our code is being written by AI. And all I can think of is that's a lot of code. Who's reviewing that? Who's making sure it works? Is something going to pop up in a year that's going to crash something, right?
So when we were kind of designing what this solution was going to look like and the type of content that was really important, Tyler and the team talked to so many tech executives, so many security leaders to really understand their pain points. And I think they heard very similar concerns. It all came down, though, fundamentally to who in my organization is even using AI? Where is it installed? I don't even have, like, it's not like traditional asset visibility where you can just get a list of installed applications and that's going to show you all of the AI. AI can show up in different ways. It can be a part of certain tools. It can be the agentic frameworks that we're going to talk about in a little bit. You've got MCP servers, you've got LLMs. Are they local? Are like the list goes on. So we had to really take a fundamentally different approach. This wasn't about just giving you a list of installed applications. We wanted to actually go deeper. We built brand new sensors to help harvest this data and show you the different categories.
All right, I'm excited for this. So, what are those different categories? What data points did you guys decide, hey, these are the ones that our customers need to know about, and these are the important ones to target?
Sure. So the first thing we're going to talk about is MCP servers, Model Context Protocol servers. Those are applications that run potentially locally within the environment that a AI or LLM can interface with to then access additional data or resources that it doesn't necessarily have access to immediately. So you had talked about what data could it potentially access. This is one of the ways that a LLM that is potentially cloud hosted could access data that is local to your network. The other item that we have is what we're calling local model managers, or another term for it is inference engines. So if you're going to run an AI locally and not use a cloud provided service, you have to have a particular piece of software called an inference engine or a local model manager to actually launch that AI. And so there's different softwares out there, and we're looking for those on Mac, Windows, Linux, as well as in containers, because you can run some of these models in a completely containerized instance. And of course, if you are running an AI locally, the question that we got from customers is, I'd like to be able to audit what models I'm actually running in my environment. Some models may have concerns in terms of what their origin is, or what there's various concerns around what model is being used from a licensing perspective as well. And then the most recent addition, just because it was popular in the news, as well as is very innovative in terms of what it's offering, is OpenClaw. So it's a open source project that's gone through a couple different names that allowed users to interface with many different services and essentially over WhatsApp or other messaging mechanisms, interact with an LLM, and then interact with other resources that were exposed to it through its what they called skills. And so there was concerns about data exposure, data loss by running OpenClaw in an unsecured manner. And so what we're doing is providing visibility into those four major categories.
I love that it's like we have this vague fear that I feel like everyone has of AI. Where is it? What's it going to do to me? You guys have actually taken that and distilled it into actionable insights to say, okay, if it's going to be interacting with my environment at all, here's these specific ways I could see it, inventory it. I can imagine that would be a huge just weight off of some people's shoulders, especially our customers, to know what's going on. So I'm excited to dig more into each one of these.
Yeah, and I think it's important for organizations to be able to look at this at a very granular level. We wanted to provide this level of detail because you're going to, every organization's decision about governance is going to be a little bit different as to where they are in their maturity journey. But each of these things warrants having a dedicated conversation about risk because they present different, even though they're all under the AI bucket, they're very different as far as the risk exposure. And we'll get into that a little bit as we go through each option.
All right. Well, our first one, I think, is our MCP servers, right?
Model context protocol servers, as we mentioned, are a way for a LLM to interface with potentially local resources. So, for instance, there are some MCP servers out there that allow you to have an LLM interact with a local database. There's also other MCP servers. For instance, you can actually look at Microsoft's documentation. They have a Learn MCP server to look at their Learn hosted documentation. And so there's a couple different risks with MCP servers. And this was one of the consistent things that we had heard from customers and CIOs is, I know MCP servers are useful. I want to know what MCP servers are in my environment, and then also be able to then see essentially look at what the MCP servers are talking to and configured. And so what we're doing is we're surfacing the MCP servers that are configured with your environment and providing you a little bit of insight into, is it potentially a locally hosted MCP? Is it a remote resource? So we're providing you what the communication type is. And so if you see the HTTP or SSE communication types, that typically means that MCP server may not be local. And what we're doing here is we're actually looking at the common integrated development environments and seeing what MCP servers are configured. There's two main ways to configure an MCP server. It could be at a per user level, or it could be in a per repository level. So think a Git repo, and then in that individual repo, there may be specific MCP servers depending on which repo we're looking at. And so we're actually surfacing both of those. And so you can see we have a couple different MCP servers here, what IDE they're used in. We have Visual Studio Code, Claude Code, and others that are supported. And this just gives you insight into what may be in use and by those endpoints. And so you can actually go through and then drill down and see what machine is running it, or you can see if it's a repository or a globally configured MCP server.
So as I'm looking at this, I'm curious, what questions should I be asking myself looking at this dashboard in my environment to determine, hey, what should I be concerned about? What thought processes do I want to approach this with to get value out of this data?
So let's go back in time, but really not that far back in time, because MCP servers haven't really been around that long. So these kind of emerged onto the landscape, I don't know, October, November of, I think, last year. It's been within the last 6 months that MCP servers really became part of the lexicon, at least in the widespread marketplace. And in that time, we've got tens of thousands that have shown up. Most of those were potentially vibe coded. The MCP server themselves wasn't necessarily put through rigorous security testing. It wasn't put through actual analysis of someone reading through line by line or putting it through the right test to make sure it's safe to deploy. And it is effectively you're putting a doggy door on the front door of your environment that someone can slip through and that information can come out of. No, it's not necessarily the same as blowing off the front of your house, but you are creating an entry point. So when you're looking at this information, you need to be saying, do I recognize these MCP servers? Does this make sense in my environment? Is this something I know and have already got an explicit policy around using? But then you can go a little bit further and say, whose computer is this? Is this someone in finance that's installed an MCP server to vibe code part of their job, and they're or is this actually part of my development environment? I've got some hobbyist stuff that I'm doing, and you'll see in here Playwright. Playwright's really cool because Playwright can scan and watch your browser and take screenshots and evaluate the behavior in the browser if you're building a web app. But that might be really scary if it's capturing sensitive internal information and sending that elsewhere, right?
And within the dashboard, we do outline some of those risks. And like Melissa talked about, the aspect of the doggy door, a lot of security before AI was actually focused on how do I prevent remote code execution by an attacker in my environment? And what we're actually doing with AI, LLMs, and MCPs is, in a way, we are taking some of the visibility out of that code execution and making it so that it's much more dynamic. And so by having these MCP servers that could run actions based on what an LLM generates, that is in a way granting code execution within your environment, and it's potentially new code that wasn't authorized for use within your environment. Now, in terms of, well, it's probably running a script. In terms of, scripts are probably approved in your environment, but do you really want that script accidentally deleting critical files? Do you really want it to accidentally run deletion or optimization commands on a production database server, for instance? And so it's really trying to first gain visibility so that then you can put guardrails and policy behind your use of AI.
I'll also call out here, like we've got a section on like the type of communication that the MCP server uses. There are some best practices for how you would harden things that are like an HTTP based uh, MCP server, and so you can make more informed decisions. Not, for a lot of organizations, it's did we even know this existed? Okay, now we know it exists. How do we harden? We need that next piece of information to make our strategy and policy decisions around.
Yeah, I also, a short little call out here, but I greatly appreciate that you have implemented a section overview, a risk section, um, a little section down here I see that says identify other MCP servers using SBOMs. All of this knowledge is super useful. If you put me back in the field today, put me back in a SOC and told me to start investigating this stuff, I honestly wouldn't know quite where to start, right? So being able to quickly kind of brush up on some of the things I should be looking at is fantastic. And I think our customers are going to think the same thing.
And this isn't the end. We've got more. This is just section one. So let's walk through what's next up here.
Next, we
All
have
right.
our local model managers. And this is referring to that piece of software, sometimes called an inference engine, that actually hosts and runs a large language model locally. And so there's a couple different ways that these are shipped. Some of them are as standalone applications that you just run the installer. It would show up in your installed applications list. Others run as a container. Some are as Python packages. And then there's also the concept of a app image file, which that's for Linux endpoints. It's a fully self-contained binary, has no dependencies, and it does not get installed through a package manager. And so what we're doing is we're surfacing where these local model managers are installed. We're providing you insights onto what type, as well as for Windows and Mac endpoints, we're providing you usage information within the last 90 days to see if someone has actually installed and run these local model managers. Just because something is present on an endpoint doesn't necessarily mean that it's actively in use.
And when it comes to like, okay, what's the difference here? Why do you care about local model managers versus MCP servers? Well, the risk is a little bit different. A lot of people assume that local model sounds safer, right? It sounds like you're keeping your data on your endpoints in your environment. But if it was misconfigured, or if someone like it literally takes, I don't know, 2 minutes to download some of these tools, get them up and running. Like I have it in my lab, and was able to get multiple different local model managers spun up within 30 minutes, and get the actual models downloaded and start running. And that ease opens the door for people to take some shortcuts and opens the door for people to then introduce vulnerability. Now, it's not the same as the MCP server. This is vulnerability in the sense of maybe they leave an open, like maybe they actually have that local model accessible to other endpoints in your environment. Or maybe they're using the local model and it's a poorly tested, poorly designed model that starts introducing bad data into the reports. So, like, as an executive, one of your nightmare scenarios is someone used an LLM to generate a report that made it into the hands of an investor or another executive and had absolute garbage in it. And that's a real risk. So you need to understand who's using it and are they using it for approved purpose. You don't want LLM generated legal contracts.
Oh, for sure. And as you're talking about this, I even think just little things that we have done and seen with AI being used with Alex and I in our daily jobs, where we're talking to people about Tanium, and sometimes we'll get bad information, like you said, that can potentially slip by because it sounds so convincing and so great. So being able to actually see it, start to see that, where is this and how do I build that management around it, I think is incredibly important. And it takes a lot of the guesswork out of it.
Another risk worth highlighting with the local models is performance. If somebody installs a local model manager and starts running this on one of your servers, Like even with a relatively powerful, modern, like optimized MacBook Pro, you're going to see performance hit if you're running some of these really heavy models. I was running some on an older Mac Mini, and everything just ground to a halt. So that that is another risk that could potentially cause an outage or cause lack of availability of other services because you're running these. So you need to understand them and need to understand the performance issues that, you can dig into that and understand if it's causing latency or if it's causing like maybe the disk isn't optimized for it. And if you did want it in your environment, you can make hardware decisions accordingly.
It's funny you mentioned performance. I do a lot of video editing, especially for the show, and my video editor has some AI tooling, and I'm like, my machine can barely handle moving like 8 tracks at a time, right, in one direction or another. I definitely don't want to introduce more performance issues.
Absolutely. All right. So we've got good stuff on these local model managers. Just thinking through like customers seeing this, they're going to start to get that visibility. They're going to start to know what's there. What do I need to create policies around? What do I need to maybe tell people pause, stop? How do we check those configurations? Is there anything I'm missing in terms of just being able to see, use this where we can get value from this piece at the dashboard?
I think awareness for the purpose of compliance is something we should touch on. One thing that if you've played around with any of these tools, you know that they have memory. And I hesitate to use the word memory because that implies real thought. And we can get into all kinds of fun philosophical discussions there. But for the sake of argument, memory. And you may be in a regulated industry where you're not supposed to retain customer data longer than necessary. But the way these models create memory could result in that sensitive data being written into memory. And I don't mean into like RAM, I mean like into the text memory on disk, which then leaves it there for an attacker. If I'm an attacker and I get into your environment, I'm going to start looking through your LLM's memories to understand what you've done, under what context, what your goals were. And I may stumble across sensitive information that would have been subject maybe to GDPR or other privacy regulations and should have been deleted. So it's important to know where these things are so that you know where you need to apply visibility and governance just to save yourself from potential fines or lawsuits later on down the line.
Well, we can keep on going here. I think the next section I heard is OpenClaw. I've also heard OpenClaw. I've heard so many different things. What's the name of the week for this? Is OpenClaw?
I think it's OpenClaw right now. I think
Okay.
which was recently they announced it was being acquired by OpenAI, but this started as an open source project you may have heard known as Claudebot. I believe there were some letters exchanged with some lawyers, so they changed it to OpenClaw. Now like it's gone through evolution, but it's also evolved really rapidly. Like a month ago nobody was talking about OpenClaw, and here we are. And it's in the news, and there's a lot more awareness of it even amongst people who aren't really deep in the tech ecosystem. So I think that's really interesting how it's become something that people are using to automate all kinds of different workflows, even if they don't have a technical background or they're not a dev. Like they're using it as basically a personal, it's everything we thought the personal assistant on our phone was going to be. OpenClaw is kind of coming in and filling that gap, and it's pretty good at it with risk. And Tyler, I'll hand off to you. Why don't you talk a little bit about like the OpenClaw ecosystem?
Sure. So OpenClaw has two components of interest from a security standpoint. First is called skills. You install skills during the OpenClaw installation process. And so, for instance, a skill would allow OpenClaw to talk with Microsoft Teams or Slack, iMessage. Those sorts of things are what they call a skill during installation. And there's plugins as well that are similar to other plugins and other applications, and that just extend its core functionality. One of the things that we've seen in the news in the reporting on OpenClaw is these skills sometimes come shipped with malware. And so there has been a push by OpenClaw in partnership with VirusTotal to ensure that the skills are free from malware and are more secure. But really, it comes down to do you trust the skill? Do you trust where it's coming from? And then also, what is your configuration? Is your configuration such that only you are the one who is interfacing with OpenClaw and then able to access this information? Is it is it tied to your password manager, for instance? Is it tied to your email? Are other outside entities able to access OpenClaw and then access your information? And so there was a lot of security risks around OpenClaw. There's lots of different reporting on how that's evolved. And so the main concern from customers that we've heard is this actually in my environment on non-personal devices, so on corporate owned and managed assets? And so that's what we're providing visibility here for in this portion of the dashboard. We're providing both running indicators as well as at-rest indicators, and you can see some of that on the dashboard. So we're looking for running processes, running containers, and then we also look for evidence on disk. So we're actually can look and see, or one of the previous versions, like Moltblot, it was Moltblot for I think maybe 2 days. And so there are versions of that still hanging out if someone hasn't updated. Claudebot, of course, the original name, and now OpenClaw. And so we're going through and looking for, has it run in the past? If you are a threat response customer, you're able to ask a trace question straight from the dashboard. Just click the button and everything is already pre-populated for you. So all of these hyperlinks here with the Ask and Interact button, those will open up a new tab and show you the results. And then we're also looking for files at rest with index or reveal. If you own SBOM, we're also detecting OpenClaw through SBOM because it is possible to install it from source rather than from just a compiled .app binary on Mac. And so we're trying to provide you with as many different ways to detect this in the various states of activity so that you can have complete confidence on, is this in my environment or not?
And I want to back up to something Tyler kind of touched on. He was like, well, there might be some versions of Moltbot out there if you haven't upgraded. Record scratch for a second. Wait, upgraded. That implies there's versions and there's patches. And oh, wait, this has vulnerabilities too. So some other researchers, I think BitSite did some scanning and reported just a couple of weeks ago, like 30,000 internet exposed instances of OpenClaw that are all potentially vulnerable to, I think there was like a CVSS 8.8 vulnerability a couple of weeks back. So you've got remote code execution vulnerabilities in something that's already kind of an invitation to remote code execution vulnerabilities. I mentioned when I spoke, kind of introduced this topic, they've recently been acquired. Like they're going to become part of OpenAI. I actually think that's a great thing because frameworks like OpenClaw are probably not going anywhere. This is the agentic future, right? But for this to be done safely really needs that sort of influx of financial resources, engineering resources, security resources to make it robust and resilient versus like a hobby project. And we shouldn't vibe code all of it, right? So I do think that we're going to see more frameworks like this emerge. And I think you're going to need to stay on top of it. I don't think OpenClaw is just a flash in the pan. I think this technology is not going anywhere. So if you're wanting to be a modern, resilient security leader, you have to get that inventory and visibility under control now. We've opened the Pandora's box. We can't take it back. So let's plan accordingly.
Oh, absolutely. There's so much just insight here that I adore coming from whether it be some of our SBOM, some of just the different pieces within Tanium, which I love, but I also want to ask, just in case someone doesn't own those things. Let's say I don't have SBOM. Will I still get data on OpenClaw?
Yes, you absolutely will. And so we provide a couple different ways of getting the information. So for instance, the running processes, everyone will be able to access that. If you have the cloud workloads installed in your environment, you'll be able to look at the running container data. File exists. That's just looking at the disk directly. And so we wanted to balance and ensure that no matter what your license type is, you are able to detect some amount of OpenClaw, and then we give you the detection guidance so you can see if you owned this particular capability, here's what it would afford you from a capability standpoint.
Yeah, that is absolutely fantastic. You guys are answering questions that before I can even get to them, right?
Our goal with any of the Guardian content is actually to do exactly that. We want to have all the answers you need up front on a dashboard. We don't want you to have to necessarily click around between the different modules that you own to be able to say, how does this play into my strategy and my solution? We want to present you the risk and what you can do about it. The team like puts so much work into really understanding these problems so that when we release the content, you're getting that cumulative benefit of all of the organizations we've spoken with, all the research we've done, all the hours in our lab, all the times Tyler has been yelling at OpenClaw. Like all you are reaping the benefits of all of that struggle, and it's something we take a lot of pride in, is being able to get that knowledge out there, because we've all been in the position of our boss knocking on our door and saying, "Hey, I saw this on like Hacker News. I saw this on Bleeping Computer. What's this OpenClaw thing?" We don't want you to have to sit there and pick it apart to try and find it in your environment. We want to get you to the point where you can have an informed conversation.
Right. Yeah, this gives me a framework to start with to say, what should I care about? What should I start looking at? What might I need to put controls around, like we've been saying this whole time. So I love it. All right, local model files. I think we're up next.
So you heard earlier we talked about local model managers or inference engines. Let's talk about the actual files themselves. These files can be anywhere from a gig or two all the way up to very giant models, and they sit on disk. And this is part of this is what the AI is using. And what when you hear people talk about, is it a good one? Is it accurate? Like the model determines a lot of that, and there's all kinds of benchmarking for it. Some models are definitely better than others for certain use cases, but there's also the fact that some models are developed as like hobby projects and some models are developed as enterprise offerings. And the lower the budget and the lower the effort that went into creating it, the more risk it presents. So you need to know what models are being used, because you can feed the same data into two different models and the quality of that model is going to output drastically different results. In addition to that, there are some models that we've got real security concerns around because the model has potentially like malicious behavior. So we want to be mindful of that and be able to audit the use of it in our environment.
And so what we're doing with the dashboard is we're surfacing local model files primarily based on file extension. And so what this is doing is it's looking for the common model format, since that is somewhat of an industry standard: GGUF, Safe Tensors, ML Model, and ONNX. And what we're doing is providing you information on where those models are on disk, what the file names are, because depending on, like Melissa said, some of these files are several gigabytes in size. So being able to crack them open and look for metadata is not necessarily something that's feasible. And so what we're doing is providing you the file name and the path. And typically with a lot of these inference engines, local model managers, when they go and get a particular model off of the internet and install it, they provide it in a very specific path or file name or both. And then from there, you're able to determine what model is in use. And so, for instance, you see here we have the Gemma 3 1B, so 1 billion parameters that's running on one of my endpoints in the lab.
There are so many models here. And just again, like we've been saying over and over, visibility. I feel like every time we come back to that same theme of I didn't know what to look for before, and now I have a concept of, oh, hey, let's look at the model files. Let's look, here's how you find them. And now, once I can see all of these, again, you've given me that framework of even trying to figure out which ones might I trust, which ones might be less secure, those hobby projects. What else are we going to be able to take away from this section?
One thing I do want to make sure we call out is that this section is specific to data from Tanium threat response. So organizations without threat response will see this panel blurred out. So don't, if you do get that, that's just an opportunity to, if you want to, contact and get threat response in your environment. This is further detail that you're capable of gathering when you have Tanium index as part of threat response in the environment. We can get you this level of granularity, and we can surface not just, hey, you've got these local models, but here's exactly where you need to go to find them. you can see the user directory it's in. It's going to just empower you to actually form a strategy of, okay, I see T Schultz. I know who that is. That's one of my developers. Like, we can mark that one onto the safe list. We know they're working on some AI capabilities for us. So I think that's important, of knowing where to go, not just that it's installed, but exactly where, and exactly then how you could go quarantine that file, or pull it off the endpoint.
We love the fact that you can see that it's installed in a user directory. The power of threat response is amazing. Just being able to find files like this, um, that is incredible. So there has been so much good stuff that we have talked about here. So much, even that I've learned through this conversation and reading your summaries about what we need should be looking for, what we can see and control with AI in our environments. And then those considerations of how do I act on this? How do I make sure we're approaching this in a planned manner? So I am so excited that we get your guys's endless hours of frustration and work and asking all of the right questions to bring us here to a place where no one else has to do that the same way. All right. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you guys want to make sure we cover for this dashboard?
I know we've tried to provide a lot of narrative and a lot of explanation of risk, but sometimes you want to just, like, give me the bottom line up front, give me like the quickest executive summary possible, and that's where that summarize button in reporting with Tanium Ask comes in really handy. So you can get yourself like a full-on contextualized, like, bullet point executive summary that you can send to your executive leaders right away. If they're like wanting regular updates, this is going to make that seamless for you without them having to like scroll down the whole page. You can just shoot an email off or pass this on to them. And I think, that if that's the way they prefer to receive information, that's going to make this even more actionable for them. And it's one of my favorite features in the platform right now is just summarize this report for me. Tell me what I care about.
That is absolutely amazing. I can already imagine, a higher up asking, "Oh, hey, do you happen to know how many MCP servers we have?" And within like a few seconds, you could send them a report that says, "Hey, there's 81 configured MCP servers in your environment," which might horrify them, but it's information that we need to know, right? So this has been an absolutely fascinating conversation. Tyler, Melissa, thank you so much for your time today. Jesh, thank you so much for being an amazing co-host as usual. And this is going to be crazy how much evolution is going to happen in such a short amount of time, considering what we've already seen from AI proliferation, right? So I'm certain we're going to have to do a follow-up episode in the not too distant future. So I'm going to get you, Melissa, and Tyler on the hook for that now officially. And thank you, Tech Talkers, for joining us today. And we'll see you next time on Tanium Tech Talks.
Yay!